Hello. Today we're stepping into the world of powerful Mafia bosses, where love, power, and betrayal always go hand in hand. The moment I spilled coffee on that man's suit, I accidentally saved his life. I just didn't know it yet. Rain hammered against the windows of Brew District Cafe hard enough to make the entire place feel underwater. Manhattan looked gray and blurry outside, all headlights and umbrellas and people rushing nowhere good. Monday mornings in November always felt cruel, but that morning felt worse somehow. Maybe because I'd slept 3 hours after pulling a closing shift the night before. Maybe because my landlord had taped another late rent notice to my apartment door. Or maybe because my life had quietly become a collection of overdue bills and burnt coffee and pretending everything was fine. Chloe, Table 6, still waiting on their cappuccinos. My manager barked from behind the espresso machine. I forced a smile I didn't feel and grabbed the tray. Got it. The cafe smelled like cinnamon syrup and wet coats. Steam hissed from the machines nonstop while customers shouted over each other, and indie music crackled softly through the ceiling speakers. Rush hour chaos. My apron already had coffee stains on it, my ponytail was falling apart, and my hands shook slightly from too much caffeine and not enough food. 24 years old and somehow already exhausted by life. I balanced 2 lattes, a black coffee, and a croissant while weaving through crowded tables near the front entrance. That was when the door opened. Cold wind rushed inside first, then him. Every sound around me seemed to dull for one strange second. He was tall, at least 6'3". Dark charcoal overcoat draped over broad shoulders like it had been tailored directly onto his body. Black leather gloves, black tie, black hair slicked back neatly despite the rain outside. Expensive, not flashy rich, dangerous rich. The kind of man who didn't need attention because the room gave it to him, automatically. People moved out of his path without realizing they were doing it. He walked beside 2 men, wearing dark suits and earpieces, but somehow he still looked like the most dangerous thing in the room. I should have looked away. Instead, I stared. And because fate apparently enjoys humiliating me personally, I slammed directly into him. The tray tilted instantly. Hot coffee exploded across the front of his white dress shirt beneath the overcoat. The black coffee splashed across his tie and sleeve while the ceramic cup shattered against the marble floor. Gasps erupted around us. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." My heart stopped, completely stopped. The entire cafe froze, silent, in the way places do when something expensive gets ruined. One of the suited men stepped toward me immediately. Fast. Too fast. His expression sharpened with something close to alarm instead of annoyance. "Sir," but the tall stranger lifted one hand slightly. The other man stopped instantly. Just like that. Authority without effort. Rainwater dripped slowly from the stranger's coat onto the cafe floor. He looked down at the coffee soaking into his white shirt, then at me. And, I forgot how breathing worked for a second. His eyes were dark gray. Not cold exactly. Controlled, like every emotion inside him had been locked behind steel doors for years. Men like him didn't exist in my world. They belonged in private clubs and penthouses and headlines about billion-dollar companies, not standing in front of a broke barista shaking apart over a ruined shirt. "I'm really sorry," I repeated quickly. "I can pay for the cleaning bill, probably not all at once," but his mouth almost moved. Not quite a smile, more like surprise. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. The question threw me off balance completely. "What?" "Your hand." I looked down. Hot coffee had splashed across my wrist without me noticing. My skin had already turned pink from the burn. "I'm fine," I lied automatically. He stared at my hand for one long second too long. Then something shifted behind him. One of the suited men suddenly grabbed the stranger's arm hard. "Damien," sharp voice, urgent. Everything happened strangely fast after that. A loud cracking sound echoed outside the cafe. Not thunder. Something else. The massive front window near the corner spiderwebbed instantly from a single impact point. Customers screamed. Someone dropped a plate. The stranger turned sharply toward the street at the exact moment another suited man grabbed my shoulder and shoved me downward behind the counter. I hit the floor hard enough to knock the air from my lungs. "Stay down," someone snapped. My ears rang. Chaos exploded around me. Chairs scraping, people shouting. One woman crying near the back of the cafe. I looked up just enough to see the tall stranger standing perfectly still near the shattered window while his men scanned the street outside. He didn't look afraid. He looked angry, controlled anger, the kind that made everyone else nervous automatically. Then his eyes found mine again across the chaos, locked onto me like he'd forgotten everyone else existed for one impossible second. "Sir, we need to move," one of the guards said urgently. Damien, that was his name. Damien looked at me one final time before adjusting the ruined cuff of his shirt slowly. Coffee stains spread across the white fabric mixed with something darker near his shoulder. At first I thought it was rainwater. Then I realized it wasn't. Blood. Not much, just enough to make my stomach tighten. He noticed me noticing, and somehow that felt worse. "Interesting timing," he murmured quietly. I wasn't even sure the words were meant for me. Then he turned and disappeared into the rain with his men surrounding him instantly. Black SUVs pulled up outside seconds later like ghosts materializing from the storm. The cafe remained silent long after they left. My manager looked pale. Customers whispered nervously while staring at the shattered window, and I stood there, shaking, beside broken ceramic pieces with burnt fingers and coffee soaking my shoes, unable to stop thinking about the blood on Damien's shirt, because deep down, beneath the confusion and adrenaline and fear, one horrible thought kept repeating itself inside my head. I didn't think the coffee spill had been an accident anymore. The cafe closed 2 hours early after the window shattered. Apparently customers stopped wanting oat milk lattes once they thought someone might start shooting through glass. Funny how that worked. I spent the next hour wiping coffee grounds off counters while police officers questioned everyone who had been inside during the incident. They called it possible vandalism. One officer suggested a construction tool from a nearby building might have hit the glass. Nobody believed that, especially not me, because I remembered the exact expression on Damien Moretti's face when the window cracked behind him. He had not looked surprised. He had looked irritated, like someone had interrupted a meeting. "You okay?" my coworker, Melissa, asked quietly, while stacking chairs onto tables. "You look pale." I forced a shrug. "Just tired." That was easier than explaining the strange feeling still crawling beneath my skin. Easier than admitting I could still hear Damien's voice in my head. "Are you hurt?" Not anger, not threats, concern. Men who looked like him were not supposed to notice burns on waitresses. Melissa lowered her voice. "Do you know who that guy was?" I shook my head automatically, even though I had already searched his name during my break. Big mistake. Damien Moretti, 32. CEO of Moretti Holdings. Real estate, shipping, private investment firms. Photos of him leaving charity galas in Manhattan beside politicians and celebrities. Photos of black SUVs. Headlines about power and money and rumors. Nobody wrote directly. Nothing illegal. Nothing provable. But every article carried the same strange undertone. Fear, dressed up as admiration. "Marco said the cops knew him," Melissa whispered. "Like really knew him." I zipped my hoodie tighter around myself. Outside, rain still soaked the streets in silver reflections, while sirens echoed somewhere downtown. "People like that always know cops," I muttered. But my mind kept drifting back to the blood near Damien's shoulder. Small stain, controlled expression, his men reacting instantly. Something about the entire thing felt wrong. like I had accidentally stepped into the middle of a movie nobody warned me about. By the time I finally clocked out, it was almost midnight. The subway platform smelled like wet concrete and old smoke. Exhaustion settled into my bones while I waited for the downtown train beside strangers, avoiding eye contact under fluorescent lights. Typical New York survival mode. I leaned against a support beam and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my landlord. 1 overdue tuition reminder, and 1 unknown number with no voicemail. Perfect. The train screeched into the station 2 minutes later. I took a seat near the back corner and rested my forehead against the cold window while Manhattan blurred past in streaks of neon and rain. Somewhere around Canal Street, I noticed the man watching me. Dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low, sitting 2 cars ahead. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe I was paranoid after the cafe incident, but every time I looked up, he seemed to already be looking at me. My stomach tightened. When the train stopped at J Street, I got off early instead of riding to my usual stop. The man stood too. Adrenaline hit me instantly, fast and ugly. He exited the train behind me while commuters rushed around us toward the stairs. Do not panic. Do not panic. I walked faster through the station. So did he. Rain hit my face hard the second I reached street level. Brooklyn at midnight looked colder than Manhattan, somehow. Quieter. I crossed the street quickly without waiting for the light. Tires splashed water across the curb, while horns echoed behind me. Footsteps followed. Not running. Steady. Controlled. I reached into my pocket for pepper spray. I never actually remembered to replace after using it last year on a drunk guy outside my building. Empty pocket. Great. Just great. I turned sharply down the side street near my apartment building. The footsteps stopped. Completely. Silence settled behind me except for rain. I looked back. Nobody there. My chest rose too fast while I scanned the sidewalk under flickering streetlights. Empty. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe exhaustion had finally broken my brain. I laughed nervously at myself while climbing the steps toward my building entrance. Then I saw it. A black SUV parked across the street. Engine running, headlights off. My blood turned cold instantly. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside. Expensive vehicle. Clean. Quiet. Watching. Every survival instinct I had started screaming. I hurried inside my building and locked the lobby door behind me harder than necessary. The elevator was broken again, which meant 5 flights of stairs, while my heart tried to punch through my ribs. By the time I reached apartment 5B, my hands shook badly enough that I dropped my keys twice. Come on, I whispered under my breath. Come on. The door finally opened. Tiny studio apartment, peeling paint, tiny kitchen, familiar safety. I locked the door immediately and pressed my back against it while catching my breath. Rain tapped softly against the fire escape outside the window. Silence filled the apartment, except for the ancient radiator clanking near the bed. I told myself I was overreacting. Rich people owned black SUVs. New York was full of weird men on subways. Nobody was following me. Nobody cared about me enough to follow me. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. My pulse spiked instantly. I stared at the screen for 3 full seconds before answering. Hello. Silence. Soft static. Then a man's voice. Calm. Deep controlled. Do not leave your apartment tonight, Chloe. Every muscle in my body locked. Who is this? Another pause. Rain crackled faintly through the phone line. Lock your windows. The voice continued quietly. And do not answer the door for anyone except me. The line disconnected. I stood frozen in the middle of my apartment, staring at the dark screen while my heartbeat thundered in my ears. Then headlights swept slowly across my window from the street below. And for the first time that night, I realized I was genuinely afraid. Fear changes the sound of an apartment. That was the first thing I realized after the phone call. Every noise suddenly meant something. The radiator knocking beside the window sounded like footsteps, Pipes groaning behind the walls sounded like whispers. Even the rain outside felt heavier somehow, like the city itself knew something I did not. I checked the lock on my apartment door 3 times in 10 minutes. Then I dragged the cheap kitchen chair beneath the doorknob like that would somehow stop anyone determined enough to get inside. My studio apartment suddenly felt painfully small. 1 room, 1 window facing the alley, 1 fire escape, rusted enough to collapse if somebody breathed on it too hard. Not exactly a fortress. My phone sat on the counter beside me while I stared at the unknown number in my recent calls list. No name, no location, nothing useful. I should have called the police. Rational people would have called the police. But what exactly was I supposed to say? A mysterious rich man with beautiful, terrifying eyes warned me not to leave my apartment after somebody cracked a cafe window this morning. They would think I was insane. Or worse, dramatic. Outside, headlights moved slowly across my curtains again. I froze immediately. The black SUV was still there. Same spot across the street. Engine idling quietly beneath the rain. Watching. Waiting. I swallowed hard and stepped away from the window. Do not panic. My mother used to say panic made people stupid. Unfortunately, I was beginning to feel extremely stupid already. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside my bed after my ex-boyfriend tried breaking into my apartment last year. Aluminum. Lightweight. Probably useless against actual criminals. But it made me feel slightly less helpless. Midnight passed slowly. 1:08, 1:23, 1:47. Sleep was impossible. I sat curled against the edge of my couch, wearing an oversized sweatshirt, while Netflix played untouched in the background, just to make the apartment feel less empty. Around 2:15 in the morning, the SUV finally drove away. Relief hit me so hard my eyes nearly watered. See? Nothing happened. Nobody was coming for me. Maybe Damien's warning had been some weird, overprotective billionaire nonsense. Maybe the SUV belonged to somebody else entirely. Maybe I could still wake up tomorrow and laugh about all this with Melissa over burnt espresso shots. Then somebody knocked on my apartment door. 3 slow knocks. Calm. Precise. My entire body locked instantly. Not possible. Nobody came to my apartment at 2 in the morning, unless something terrible happened. Another knock. I tightened my grip on the baseball bat while stepping silently toward the door. Who is it? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Silence answered first, then his voice. Open the door, Chloe. My pulse crashed into overdrive immediately. Damien. Deep. Controlled. Impossible to mistake. I should not have opened the door. Every survival instinct screamed against it. But somehow, his voice frightened me less than the silence outside had. I unlocked the deadbolt carefully while keeping the chain latched. The door opened 2 inches, and suddenly the hallway felt too small for him. Damien Moretti stood beneath the flickering apartment light, still wearing that dark overcoat from earlier, rainwater glistening across his shoulders. His tie was gone now. The top buttons of his white dress shirt hung open slightly near the collar. The coffee stain remained faintly visible across the fabric. So did the blood. More than before. Not dramatic. Just enough to make my stomach tighten again. Behind him stood one of the men from the cafe. Broad shoulders, black suit, expression carved from stone. You should not have answered the phone, Damien said quietly. I blinked. What? The number was not secure anymore. Confusion tangled with fear inside my chest. You called me. Yes. His eyes moved briefly past me into the apartment, assessing exits, windows, space, every movement calm and practiced. Then somebody else intercepted the call. The hallway suddenly felt colder. I do not understand what is happening. I know. He sounded almost tired when he said it. Rain tapped softly against the building windows while silence stretched between us. Up close, Damien looked different than he had in the cafe. Less polished, more dangerous, somehow. like the expensive businessman image had started slipping at the edges. I noticed faint bruising near his knuckles, a thin cut near his jawline, tiny details impossible to see earlier. Human details. "You are bleeding," I said before thinking. His gaze snapped back to mine immediately, intense enough to make my heartbeat stumble. "You noticed that before. Kinda hard not to." One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Again, not quite a smile. "May I come in?" Every intelligent thought inside my brain screamed no, absolutely not. But another sound interrupted before I could answer. Footsteps downstairs. Fast. Multiple voices, echoing faintly through the stairwell. Damien's expression changed instantly. Not panic. Calculation. His body shifted slightly between me and the hallway without seeming to think about it. "Chloe," he said, quietly, "you need to trust me for the next 5 minutes." Fear curled tight beneath my ribs. Why? Another sound. Closer this time. Someone trying apartment doors downstairs. My blood turned ice cold. Damien looked toward the stairwell once, before returning his attention to me. Controlled. Steady. Dangerous. "Because whoever is coming upstairs right now believes you are connected to me." The words landed like falling concrete. "What?" "And if they find you alone," he said softly, "this night becomes much worse for both of us." Then the lights in the hallway went out. Darkness changes people. That was the second thing I learned that night. The moment the hallway lights died, the entire building seemed to inhale sharply around us. Somewhere downstairs, a door slammed hard enough to rattle the pipes inside the walls. Then silence. Heavy silence. The kind that made your imagination cruel. I stared at Damien through the narrow opening in my apartment door while my heartbeat crashed violently against my ribs. Rainwater glistened across the sharp line of his jaw. Calm eyes. Steady breathing. Meanwhile, I felt one bad second away from a complete panic attack. "Chloe." His voice stayed low, controlled. "Open the door fully." Absolutely not. One corner of his mouth twitched slightly, despite the situation. Fair response. More footsteps echoed downstairs. Closer this time, somebody moving quickly up the stairwell. Instinctively, I tightened my grip on the baseball bat hidden behind my leg. Damien noticed immediately. Of course he did. Men like him noticed everything. "If you intended to hit me with that," he murmured quietly, "you should have done it before opening the door." I almost laughed from pure nerves. "You are not helping." Another sound interrupted us. Voices downstairs, male, muffled. One sentence floated upward clearly enough to freeze my blood. 5th floor. Damien's expression hardened instantly. Not fear, decision. Open the door now. Something in his tone cut straight through my panic. Sharp, absolute. Before my brain fully caught up, I unlatched the chain and pulled the door open wider. Damien stepped inside immediately, while the large man behind him stayed in the hallway near the stairwell. The apartment suddenly felt even smaller, with Damien standing inside it. Too tall, too composed, too dangerous for peeling wallpaper and thrift store furniture. His eyes swept across the room once in a quick, efficient scan. Bed, kitchenette, fire escape window, bathroom, exits, vulnerabilities. Then he looked at me, put shoes on. "What? You are leaving?" "No." The answer came automatically. "I am not going anywhere with you. You no longer have a choice." Anger flashed hot through my fear. "You cannot just show up in my apartment at 2 a.m. and start giving orders." "Actually," he said, calmly, "that is exactly what I am doing." Somewhere downstairs, metal clanged loudly against the stair railing. Closer now. Damien reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a phone. Marco. Quiet voice. Controlled urgency. "Rear alley in 90 seconds. A pause while someone answered. "No police." He hung up and looked at me again. "Chloe, how do you even know where I live?" "I had your address," within 20 minutes of leaving the cafe. Honest, direct. Somehow worse than lying. That is insane. That is precaution. Normal people do not investigate baristas. I am not normal people. Fair point, unfortunately. Another sound echoed outside the apartment door. Slow footsteps now. 5th floor. My stomach dropped hard. Damien moved instantly toward the window near the fire escape. Smooth. Efficient. Every motion practiced enough to terrify me more. Grab your coat. I am not climbing out a window with a stranger. I am not a stranger anymore. His gaze met mine directly. And if you stay here tonight, somebody else reaches you first. Fear curled tighter around my lungs. The hallway outside had gone completely silent now. Somehow that felt worse. Damien crossed the apartment in 3 long strides and stopped directly in front of me. Too close suddenly. His voice lowered slightly. Listen carefully. This situation is not your fault, but somebody believes you interrupted an attempt on my life this morning. My breath caught, painfully. The cafe. Yes, that was not vandalism. No, he said it simply. No drama, no hesitation, just truth. Rain tapped softly against the fire escape outside, while my entire world tilted sideways. Why would anyone think I was involved? Because your timing was impossible. I spilled coffee. Exactly. Another knock hit the apartment door suddenly. Loud, sharp. I jumped violently. Damien did not even flinch. Miss Bennett, a male voice called calmly from outside. Building security. Damien's eyes darkened instantly. Your building does not have security, he said quietly. Terror shot straight through me. Another knock. Miss Bennett, we just need to ask a few questions about. Earlier today, the voice sounded friendly. That somehow made it worse. Damien stepped backward toward the window, slowly, without taking his eyes off the door. Coat. Now. I moved automatically this time. Fear, finally overpowering stubbornness. My fingers shook badly while grabbing my sneakers and oversized jacket from beside the couch. The knocking came again. More impatient now. Miss Bennett? Damien opened the fire escape window carefully. Cold, rain, and city noise rushed instantly into the apartment. You climb first, he said. I stared at the narrow metal staircase, disappearing into darkness below. I hate heights. Tonight is full of disappointments. The doorknob rattled hard. Once, twice, somebody trying the lock. Panic exploded through my chest. Damien stepped closer immediately. Chloe. Calm voice again, steady enough to cut through my spiraling thoughts. Look at me. I did. Those dark gray eyes locked onto mine with terrifying focus. You are going to climb down exactly 1 flight. Marco will meet you in the alley below. And you? Another hard rattle against the apartment door. Damien glanced toward it briefly before looking back at me. I need to delay. The simplicity of the statement chilled me more than the rain pouring through the window. Damien, go. Not shouted, not harsh, absolute. Behind us, wood cracked softly near the doorframe. My pulse nearly stopped. Damien stepped aside toward the apartment entrance while loosening the cuffs of his ruined white shirt with calm, deliberate movements that made my fear spike even higher. Then he looked at me one final time beside the open fire escape window. Trust me enough to survive the next 10 minutes, he said quietly. After that, you can hate me all you want. Then the apartment door burst inward. The sound of my apartment door breaking open followed me onto the fire escape like a gunshot inside my chest. Rain hit my face instantly, cold enough to steal my breath while my sneakers slipped against wet metal stairs. Somewhere behind me, voices exploded inside the apartment. Male voices, angry, sharp. I did not look back. Every instinct screamed to run. The fire escape rattled violently beneath my weight as I climbed downward into darkness and rain and the kind of fear that made your hands numb. 5 stories suddenly felt much taller at 2:30 in the morning. Wind whipped my oversized jacket against my body while distant sirens echoed through Brooklyn streets below. Careful, a voice called quietly from underneath me. I nearly screamed. The large man from earlier stood in the alley below, beside a black SUV, with the rear passenger door already open. Marco. Even standing still, he looked dangerous enough to scare most people into crossing the street. Broad shoulders beneath a black wool coat, gray streaks near his temples, cold eyes scanning rooftops and windows constantly like he expected the city itself to attack him. "Move," he ordered calmly. Another crash echoed from somewhere above us, inside the building. My pulse spiked harder. Damien, Mr. Moretti will handle it. The certainty in his voice should not have comforted me. Somehow it did anyway. I climbed the final ladder too quickly and almost slipped near the bottom. Marco caught my arm instantly before I hit the pavement. Strong grip. Controlled. Professional. Easy. What is happening? I demanded breathlessly. Rain soaked my hair against my face while panic tangled every thought together. Who are those people? Marco opened the SUV door wider. Not here. I am not getting into a car with strangers. His expression did not change. Miss Bennett, men just forced entry into your apartment building at 2 a.m. Respectfully, we are beyond stranger danger. Fair point, unfortunately. Tires screeched somewhere nearby. Marco's attention snapped instantly toward the mouth of the alley. Now, he said sharply. That single word carried enough authority to override my fear completely. I climbed into the SUV without another argument. The interior smelled like leather and expensive cologne. Warm. Quiet. Completely disconnected from the chaos outside. Marco shut the door behind me before moving toward the driver's seat. Seconds later, the vehicle pulled away from the alley smoothly just as 2 dark sedans turned onto the street behind us. Were they following us? I asked immediately. Marco checked the side mirror once. Probably. Probably, you will discover very quickly that certainty is rare in our world. Our world. The phrase twisted uncomfortably inside my chest. Rain streaked across the tinted windows while Brooklyn blurred past outside in silver reflections and red brake lights. My entire life suddenly felt very far away. The cafe, my tiny apartment, late rent notices. Those things belonged to another version of me from maybe 6 hours ago. Where is Damien? Marco's eyes flicked toward me briefly in the rearview mirror. Handling a complication. That does not answer my question. No, he agreed, calmly. It does not. Frustration flared through my fear. You people speak in riddles constantly. Do you know how insane this feels for me? Yes. His answer came immediate. Honest. Then explain something. My voice shook, despite my effort to control it. Why are people suddenly trying to find me? Marco stayed silent long enough that I thought he might ignore the question completely. Finally, he sighed quietly. Because this morning somebody attempted to eliminate Damien Moretti in broad daylight. My stomach tightened hard. And they think I was involved? No. Then why am I running through alleys in the rain? Because you interrupted the timing. He paused slightly. That made you visible. Visible. The word settled heavily inside the SUV. I spilled coffee. You changed the exact second. Damien stopped walking. Marco's voice remained calm. Matter of fact. 1 second matters. I stared out the rain-covered window while cold realization crawled slowly through me. If I had not crashed into Damien inside the cafe, he would have reached the shattered window 3 steps earlier, exactly where the impact happened. My throat suddenly felt tight. Oh my God. Marco did not respond. He did not need to. Silence confirmed everything. We crossed the Manhattan Bridge. 20 minutes later, the city skyline rose ahead of us, glowing gold against storm clouds, while traffic thinned across wet streets. I should have felt relieved, returning to Manhattan. Instead, my anxiety only worsened, because people like Damien Moretti belonged here. Towering buildings, black cars, hidden worlds behind mirrored glass. Meanwhile, I still felt like a terrified waitress, accidentally trapped inside the wrong movie. The SUV finally slowed beside an enormous residential tower overlooking the East River. Glass, steel, security guards beneath covered entrances. The kind of building where apartments cost more per month than I earned in a year. No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. Marco parked smoothly beneath the awning while rain hammered against the roof overhead. Miss Bennet, I am not staying in some billionaire fortress with a man connected to whatever this is. Unfortunately, Marco replied calmly, your apartment is no longer secure. As if summoned by the sentence itself, my phone buzzed violently inside my jacket pocket. Unknown number again. My stomach dropped. Marco noticed instantly. Answer it on speaker. My fingers trembled slightly while accepting the call. Silence crackled softly through the line for 2 long seconds. Then a male voice spoke. Different this time. Colder. You should have stayed in Brooklyn, Chloe. Ice flooded straight through my chest. Who is this? Soft laughter answered me. Tell Moretti we know where he hides his pretty little witness. The line disconnected instantly. Silence filled the SUV afterward except for rain pounding outside and my own breathing turning uneven. Marco's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. Then the rear passenger door opened beside me. Cold wind swept inside, carrying rain and expensive cologne with it. Damien slid into the seat next to me, looking slightly more exhausted than before. Shirt damp, jaw tense, gray eyes immediately scanning my face for injuries. Are you hurt? He asked quietly. Same question again, same impossible calm. I stared at him in disbelief. My apartment door exploded 10 minutes ago. His gaze softened slightly at the edges. That is not what I asked. Rain slid slowly down the tinted SUV windows, while silence settled heavily between Damien and me. Outside, Manhattan glowed gold and silver beneath the storm like another universe entirely. Inside the car, everything smelled like leather, cold air, and the faint metallic trace of blood still lingering beneath Damien's expensive cologne. I realized suddenly how close he was sitting beside me. Not touching, never careless enough for that. But close enough that I could see the exhaustion beneath his calm expression for the first time. Tiny shadows under his eyes, tension locked into the line of his jaw, human cracks in the armor. You are not answering the question, I said quietly. Damien loosened the cuff of his damp white shirt slightly before looking at me again. Neither are you. What? You are shaking. I looked down immediately. My hands trembled against my lap hard enough to embarrass me. Adrenaline, exhaustion, fear, probably all three. That tends to happen after strangers break into your apartment. Damien's gaze held mine steadily. You are safe now. The certainty in his voice should not have affected me the way it did. But something inside me loosened anyway, just slightly. Dangerous mistake. Marco stepped out of the SUV first and spoke briefly with 2 security guards beneath the building awning before nodding toward Damien. The massive glass doors opened immediately. Wealth recognized wealth. Power recognized power even faster. Damien turned toward me. Come inside. I still do not understand why this is happening. I know. That answer is getting old. For the first time all night, something resembling amusement flickered briefly across his face. Quick, barely visible, gone almost immediately. And he stepped out into the rain before I could answer. I should have stayed inside the SUV. Any sane person would have demanded police protection instead of following a man connected to armed strangers and shattered windows. But another memory surfaced immediately. The voice on the phone. Pretty little witness. Fear moved faster than logic. I climbed out after him. The building lobby looked like something from a movie. Black marble floors reflecting chandelier light. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Fresh white orchids placed near the front desk that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Security personnel dressed in dark suits instead of uniforms. Quiet luxury. The kind designed for people who never worried about money a single day in their lives. Meanwhile, my soaked sneakers squeaked against polished marble, while my hoodie smelled like subway rain and pen. I suddenly felt painfully out of place. Damien noticed instantly. Of course he did. No one here will disrespect you, he said quietly beside me while we crossed the lobby toward private elevators. That was not my concern. It should be. The elevator doors opened immediately without anyone pressing a button. Penthouse access apparently recognized him automatically, another detail that should have terrified me more than it already did. Inside the elevator, silence returned. Soft instrumental music played quietly overhead while Manhattan lights reflected against mirrored walls around us. 37 floors climbed impossibly fast. I folded my arms tightly across my chest. So what now? Damien leaned briefly against the polished metal wall behind him. Now you stay somewhere secure until we understand who leaked your location. Leaked? Somebody knew where to find you tonight. His expression darkened slightly. That information should not have existed outside my immediate circle. A strange coldness settled into the elevator. Not fear this time. Realization. You think somebody close to you betrayed you. Damien's eyes met mine directly. I think somebody underestimated how quickly I would notice. The elevator doors opened before I could respond. And suddenly I understood exactly how rich Damien Moretti truly was. The penthouse stretched wider than my entire apartment floor back in Brooklyn. Dark hardwood, massive windows overlooking Manhattan in glowing midnight reflections, modern furniture in charcoal and cream, quiet jazz drifting through hidden speakers somewhere overhead. Everything looked expensive, without trying too hard to look expensive. The kind of wealth that stopped needing to prove itself years ago. But what caught my attention most was the security. Men in dark suits, positioned discreetly near hallways and exits. Cameras hidden carefully inside corners. Locked glass doors leading deeper into the penthouse. This was not a home. It was a fortress, pretending to be a luxury apartment. Damien removed his overcoat slowly and handed it to a waiting employee before turning toward me. You should eat something. I stared at him in disbelief. People are apparently hunting me across New York, and you are worried about dinner? You have not eaten in hours? How do you know that? You spilled coffee carrying breakfast trays at 7:42 this morning. Calm answer. Precise. You never finished your shift before leaving the cafe. I blinked at him. That is deeply unsettling. Probably. Another tiny, almost smile. Again, gone too quickly. One of the security men approached quietly. Sir. Damien's expression shifted immediately back into cold focus. What is it? The team finished sweeping Miss Bennett's apartment building. The man hesitated briefly before continuing. They found surveillance equipment across the alley rooftop. My stomach dropped instantly. Surveillance. Damien looked toward me slowly. You were being watched long before tonight. Cold fear slid straight down my spine. Why? That, Damien said quietly, is what concerns me. Silence stretched heavily between us. Rain streaked across the massive penthouse windows behind him while the city glowed endlessly below. Somewhere far beneath this building, normal people still lived normal lives. People worrying about subway delays and overdue bills and tomorrow morning's coffee order. Meanwhile, I stood barefoot on marble floors beside one of the most dangerous men in New York while strangers tracked my apartment through surveillance equipment. Nothing about my life made sense anymore. Damien studied my face for one long quiet second before speaking again. There is a guest room prepared for you. You already prepared one? I prepare for most outcomes. That sounds exhausting. It is. The honesty in his voice surprised me enough to look at him again. Really look at him. Not the expensive suit, not the dangerous reputation. The man himself. Tired eyes, controlled breathing. Blood still faintly visible near the shoulder of his ruined white shirt, from where somebody had tried to kill him less than 20 hours earlier. And somehow, despite everything, the only thing he had asked me all night was whether I was hurt. Damien noticed me staring. What? he asked quietly. I swallowed once before, answering honestly. I cannot decide if you are the reason my life is falling apart, I admitted softly, or the only reason I am still alive. Damien did not answer my question immediately. He just looked at me across the soft golden light of the penthouse, while rain moved slowly down the massive windows behind him. The silence stretched long enough to feel intentional, controlled. Everything about him felt controlled, even quiet. Finally, he stepped closer, not enough to invade my space, just enough that his voice no longer needed volume. Probably both, he said softly. The honesty hit harder than reassurance would have. Before I could respond, another man entered from the hallway, carrying a small medical case. Mid-50s, maybe. Gray hair. Calm expression. Sir, he said quietly. Damien barely looked away from me. Later, the shoulder needs stitches. My eyes snapped immediately toward the dark stain near Damien's shirt again. Stitches. Somehow hearing the word made everything more real. Damien exhaled once through his nose like a man already exhausted by the conversation. 5 minutes, Victor. The older man nodded respectfully before disappearing again down the hallway. I stared at Damien in disbelief. You are just going to ignore that? It is not serious. You are bleeding through your shirt. That tends to happen. I folded my arms tighter across myself. You are unbelievably calm for someone who almost died this morning. Damien studied me carefully for one long second. And you are surprisingly composed for someone whose apartment was compromised tonight. Fair point again. I hated when he did that. Made my arguments sound emotional, while his sounded logical. The worst part was he usually seemed right. A woman appeared quietly beside us, carrying folded clothes and a towel. Early 40s. Elegant black dress. Kind eyes. Miss Bennet, she said warmly. I am Sophia. I prepared the guest suite for you. Guest suite. My entire apartment probably fit inside one of the closets here. Sophia offered me the folded clothes gently. Soft gray sweatpants. Oversized cream sweater. Thank you, I murmured automatically. Damien's gaze shifted briefly toward the towel in Sophia's arms. And tea, he added calmly. Chamomile. I blinked at him. How do you know I drink chamomile tea? You ordered it every Tuesday and Thursday during your evening shifts. Silence. Complete silence. I stared at him while my brain attempted to process that sentence. You have been watching me. Damien did not deny it. Not personally. That is somehow not comforting. Sophia looked very carefully at the floor while hiding what might have been amusement. Damien remained completely serious. You were connected to an active threat assessment involving your apartment complex before the cafe. Yes. Cold confusion twisted through me immediately. What does that mean? Damien's jaw tightened slightly. First real hesitation I had seen from him all night. It means this situation did not begin by accident. My pulse slowed strangely instead of speeding up, like fear had finally reached a level too large for panic. Explain. Not tonight. Anger flared instantly. You do not get to drag me into this nightmare and then refuse to answer questions. Something dangerous flickered briefly behind his eyes, then disappeared, just as quickly. Not anger at me. Something else. Restraint, maybe. You are exhausted, he said quietly, and frightened. Obviously, I am frightened. Then sleep first. I do not think I can sleep in a penthouse full of armed men. One corner of his mouth moved faintly again. Most people sleep better here. Most people are probably not hiding from mystery stalkers. Damien stepped slightly closer, close enough now that I caught the faint scent of rain still lingering on his shirt beneath the expensive cologne. No one enters this floor without my permission, he said quietly. No one reaches you tonight. The certainty in his voice settled into the room like gravity itself. Terrifying. Comforting. Both at once. I hated that combination. Sophia cleared her throat softly. Miss Bennet, let me show you the room. I followed her down the hallway, mostly because my body had finally reached complete exhaustion. The penthouse seemed endless. Dark artwork, quiet lighting, security cameras hidden discreetly near corners. Every detail beautiful and intimidating at the same time. Sophia opened a door near the end of the hall, and I stopped dead immediately. The guest room was larger than my apartment. King-size bed, fireplace, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, marble bathroom glowing softly beneath warm lights. Somewhere along the way, my life had apparently turned into a billionaire hostage situation. There are fresh toiletries inside the bathroom, Sophia said gently, and security remains outside this hallway all night. That sentence should not be reassuring. Her smile softened slightly. Mr. Moretti has many flaws. Interesting wording. But failing to protect people under his care is not one of them. Under his care, the phrase lingered strangely in my chest after she left. I closed the bedroom door slowly behind me and finally allowed myself one full breath. Silence filled the room, except for distant rain against glass. The soft bed looked unreal compared to my ancient mattress back in Brooklyn, my apartment. The thought hit, suddenly and painfully. Everything I owned was still there. My sketchbooks, my laptop, photos of my parents, tiny ordinary pieces of my normal life, now sitting behind a broken apartment door somewhere across the city. Emotion tightened unexpectedly in my throat. I sat carefully at the edge of the bed while staring out at Manhattan lights below. 24 hours ago, my biggest problem had been late rent and surviving another double shift at the cafe. Now, armed men guarded a hallway outside my bedroom, while one of the most dangerous men in New York somehow knew my tea order by heart. A quiet knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. I stiffened immediately. Who is it? Damien. Of course it was. I crossed the room carefully and opened the door halfway. Damien stood there alone now, wearing a fresh black dress shirt rolled slightly at the sleeves. The blood was gone. So was the tie. Somehow he looked even more dangerous without it. Less businessman, more something else entirely. His gray eyes moved briefly across my face like he was checking for signs of panic. Sophia said, "You have not eaten." I almost laughed from exhaustion. You really fixate on that. You skip breakfast, calm answer again, and lunch. That is still creepy, probably. Another almost smile, softer this time. Damien held out a small white plate toward me. Toast, strawberries, tea, ridiculously normal things inside a completely insane night. You need sleep, he said quietly. I stared at the food for a second before finally looking back at him. And what do you need? Something unreadable flickered across his expression, then vanished. To find whoever put you in danger before they try again. Then his eyes lowered briefly toward the cream sweater in my hands before returning to mine. Lock the door tonight anyway, he added softly. It will make you feel safer. I locked the bedroom door after Damien left, even though I already knew no lock in this building mattered unless he allowed it to. That realization should have terrified me more than it did. Instead, exhaustion finally dragged me under hard enough that I barely remembered crawling into bed. The mattress felt impossibly soft compared to the one in my apartment. Warm sheets, quiet air. Safety so unfamiliar it almost hurt, but fear followed me into sleep anyway. I dreamed about shattered glass and black SUVs and gray eyes watching me across crowded rooms. I dreamed about my apartment door breaking open while I stood frozen, unable to move. Then suddenly Damien was there again, asking the same question over and over. Are you hurt? I woke some time before sunrise with my heart racing and the strange disorienting feeling that I had forgotten where I was. Pale blue light spilled across the massive windows, while Manhattan slowly brightened beneath heavy rain clouds. For one peaceful second, everything felt quiet. Then I noticed the figure standing near the window. I jerked upright instantly. Damien turned slightly at the sound of movement. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I did not mean to wake you." My pulse slowly steadied once recognition replaced panic. He stood near the far side of the room, wearing dark slacks and a black sweater instead of another suit for once. One hand rested inside his pocket while the other held a coffee cup. Somehow he still looked intimidating enough to make the entire room feel smaller. "How did you get in here?" His gaze shifted briefly toward the locked door. "You locked it incorrectly." I stared at him in disbelief. That is the least comforting sentence anyone has ever said to me. Something softer flickered briefly through his expression. "Noted." Rain moved slowly down the windows behind him, while silence settled between us again. I became painfully aware that I was sitting in his bed, wearing his expensive guest clothes, with tangled hair and zero dignity left. What time is it? 6:15. In the morning? That is generally when 6:15 occurs. I narrowed my eyes at him. "Do you ever sleep?" Damien took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "Rarely." Somehow that answer felt honest. In a way, most of his words carefully avoided. I rubbed exhaustion from my face while glancing toward the skyline outside. "Why are you in my room at dawn? Your apartment building made the news. Instantly awake now." "What?" Damien crossed the room slowly and handed me a tablet from the nearby desk. A local news station filled the screen. My building appeared behind bright yellow police tape while reporters spoke dramatically into microphones about a possible gas explosion investigation. Gas explosion. I stared at the damaged fifth-floor windows visible behind the reporter. My windows, my apartment. That was not a gas explosion. No. Damien's voice remained calm. But it is the explanation currently being provided publicly. My stomach tightened hard. People could have been hurt. The building was evacuated before the damage spread. Because of you? He held my gaze steadily. Yes. I looked back at the screen again while cold realization settled deeper inside me. My old life was disappearing piece by piece behind carefully controlled headlines. My things are still there. Damien remained quiet for a second. "Some of them." "What does that mean?" Another hesitation. "Tiny. Barely visible. The apartment itself is now evidence." Fear crawled back immediately. "Evidence of what?" "Someone searched it thoroughly after you left." I swallowed hard. "Looking for what?" "That," Damien said quietly, "is what concerns me." Frustration flashed instantly through my chest. "You keep saying things like that instead of giving actual answers, because actual answers become dangerous very quickly. My life already feels dangerous. You have no idea." The words landed heavily between us. Not threatening, just honest. Damien moved back toward the window overlooking the river while the city slowly woke beneath us. Helicopters drifted across the skyline in the distance. Traffic thickened along wet streets below. Normal life continuing while mine quietly collapsed. "Did they find anything in my apartment?" I asked softly. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes." My pulse spiked. "What?" "Photos." Cold confusion hit immediately. "Of me?" "Of both of us." I stared at him. "That is impossible." "Someone photographed the cafe yesterday morning." He turned toward me again slowly. "And someone else placed surveillance equipment across from your building before last night." My mind struggled desperately to connect pieces that refused to fit together. Why would anyone care about me before I met you? Damien's expression darkened slightly at the question. "That," he repeated quietly, "is exactly what I intend to discover." Silence filled the room again, except for rain tapping softly against glass. I realized suddenly that Damien looked exhausted too. Not physically exactly, something deeper. The kind of exhaustion carried by people who spent too long surviving instead of living. "Did you stay awake all night?" I asked before thinking. His eyes shifted back toward me. "Mostly because of me?" Another pause. "Because whoever organized this situation understood details they should not have known, meaning meaning someone close to me is talking. The temperature in the room seemed to drop slightly after that sentence. I looked at him carefully then. Really carefully. Powerful men in movies always looked invincible. Damien did not. Dangerous, yes. Controlled, absolutely. But not invincible. There was tension hidden beneath every calm movement now. Distrust behind his eyes. You do not know who to trust, I realized quietly. His gaze locked onto mine immediately. Sharp. Intense. Honest. Very few people. Something about that answer hurt, unexpectedly. Maybe because I suddenly understood how lonely his world must actually be beneath all the power and security and expensive walls. My phone buzzed suddenly on the bedside table, hard enough to make both of us look toward it. Instantly. Unknown number. Again. Fear tightened my chest. Immediately. Damien crossed the room before I could even reach for it. Calm. Fast. Controlled. He picked up the phone and stared at the screen for one silent second before answering on speaker. Talk. Soft static crackled through the line. Then, a familiar male voice spoke slowly. Good morning, Moretti. My blood turned cold instantly. You are becoming difficult to predict. The voice continued calmly. That usually means somebody close to you is lying. Damien's expression never changed. Who is this? Quiet laughter answered him. Ask the girl about her father. The line disconnected. The room went completely silent after the call disconnected. Rain continued sliding down the windows behind Damien, while my heartbeat suddenly felt too loud inside the quiet bedroom. Ask the girl about her father. The sentence repeated inside my head over and over like something trying to unlock a door I did not know existed. Damien lowered the phone slowly without taking his eyes off the dark screen. For the first time since meeting him, I saw something dangerously close to anger slip through his control. Not explosive anger. Worse. Cold anger. Focused. What does that mean? I asked quietly. Damien looked up at me immediately. Sharp gray eyes. Calculating. Tell me about your father. Confusion tightened inside my chest. My father died when I was 12. How? Car accident. The answer came automatically, because I had repeated it most of my life. Teachers. Friends. Therapists. After the nightmares got bad for a while. Same answer every time. Simple, clean, finished. Damien remained completely still near the window. And your mother? She died too. My throat tightened slightly despite myself. Same accident. He watched me carefully enough to make me suddenly uncomfortable. What? Nothing. That does not look like nothing. Damien crossed the room slowly before setting the phone down beside the bed. Did anyone ever investigate the accident? I was 12. Irritation flickered beneath my confusion now. I do not know. Why are you asking me this? Because somebody just risked exposing themselves to mention your father specifically. Maybe they are messing with us. Maybe. He did not sound convinced. Neither did I suddenly. Strange memories surfaced without warning. My father arguing quietly on the phone late at night. My mother locking doors obsessively during the final months before the accident. Small details I had forgotten for years because children normalize almost anything. Chloe. Damien's voice softened slightly. What are you thinking? I looked away toward the rain outside. Nothing important. Try me. I hesitated before answering. My parents were always nervous near the end. Saying it out loud made the memory feel sharper somehow. I remember my father checking the street through the curtains constantly. Damien's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. Did he work in finance? The question startled me. How did you know that? Your file. I sighed softly. Right. Of course, powerful Mafia billionaires kept files on people. He worked for an investment firm downtown. Damien stayed quiet. Too quiet. What? I asked again. Which firm? I do not remember. Frustration tightened inside me. I was a kid, Damien. He nodded once slowly. Try. I rubbed tiredness from my face while forcing myself to think through memories I had not touched in years. Something with a C, maybe. Silence. Carter. Another pause. Carter and Vale. The second I said the name, something shifted in Damien's expression. Tiny. Dangerous. My stomach tightened immediately. You know it. Damien looked toward the rain-covered skyline for one long second, before answering quietly. Your father worked for a company connected to my family 20 years ago. Cold flooded through me instantly. What? Indirectly. What does indirectly mean? It means the company handled offshore financial transfers for organizations that preferred privacy. I stared at him. That sounds incredibly illegal. Sometimes it was. The honesty should not have shocked me anymore. Somehow it still did. My father was not a criminal. Damien's gaze returned to mine immediately. I did not say he was. Then why does any of this matter now? Before Damien could answer, another knock sounded lightly against the bedroom door. Marco entered a second later carrying a thin black folder. His expression remained calm but tighter than usual somehow. Sir. Damien took the folder immediately. What is it? The surveillance team identified the rooftop observer from Brooklyn. Marco glanced briefly toward me before continuing carefully. He previously worked security for Carter and Vale. Every drop of blood seemed to drain from my body at once. Damien opened the folder silently while I sat frozen on the edge of the bed trying to process what I had just heard. My father's company, surveillance equipment, the cafe, me. None of it made sense together. That is impossible, I whispered. Marco looked at me with something almost sympathetic. The company collapsed 18 years ago after several federal investigations. My father died before that, yes. Damien's voice remained dangerously calm while scanning the file in his hands, which means somebody connected to the old network recognized your name before we did. Fear crawled slowly up my spine. Recognize me from what? Damien looked up from the folder finally. That is the wrong question. Then what is the right question? Silence stretched heavily between us. Why were they watching you before you ever met me? The room suddenly felt too small again. I stood abruptly and crossed toward the massive windows, needing space from the conversation. Manhattan sprawled endlessly below, while rain blurred the city into silver and gold streaks. Somewhere out there existed the normal version of my life that no longer seemed reachable. I do not understand any of this, I admitted softly. My father died years ago. Damien approached quietly behind me, but stopped several feet away, respecting distance even now. Some debts survive longer than people, he said. And some secrets become more dangerous with time. I wrapped my arms tightly around myself. You really know how to make people feel better. Another almost smile touched his mouth briefly. Gone too fast. Not one of my stronger skills. Something about that answer loosened tension inside my chest unexpectedly. Maybe because it sounded real. Not polished. Just tired honesty from a man carrying too much control for too long. Marco's phone buzzed suddenly from across the room. He answered immediately, listening in silence for several seconds before looking toward Damien. Sir, the single word carried enough weight to tighten the entire room instantly. Damien's posture shifted, almost invisibly. Predator alertness. What happened? There was another breach attempt downstairs. My pulse spiked immediately. Marco continued calmly. One of the intruders carried a photo. Damien's expression hardened. Of Chloe? No. Marco hesitated slightly. Of her father. Silence crashed through the room hard enough to steal my breath. Damien looked at me slowly then. Not surprised anymore. Certain. And, somehow that terrified me far more.